The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Week 11 DraftKings picks and preview. Sorry about, being absent on Tuesday, but hey, we're going to make it up with shows on Thursday, so here we go. A bit later information in the week, too, which is always nice instead of just trying to be out first for everything. I'll get back to that next week, but this week, maybe the picks will be better. Who knows? It's probably not just going to be me bringing the heat on this one. I have Chris Raybon from the Action Network joining me, and last time he was on, I had a great week. I assume everyone out there had a great week. So, Chris, you ready to bring the heat again?
Oh, yeah, let's get this shmoney.
All right, so before we get into that, I do want to let everyone know I'm giving away 20 DK bucks, and here's how you get in the draw. Smash the like button for this episode, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and let me know which of the running backs above $7,000 on the main slate this week. So Sunday early, Sunday late, no primetime games here. This is all we're talking about, the Millionaire Makers slate. So the running backs above $7,000, which one would you play? If you could only play one, which one would you play? And I guess we'll roll right into running backs, Chris. If it was you and it was over $7,000, which of these running backs would you play?
I would go with David Johnson because
we're on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, James Conner's a little bit cheaper. We don't know if, for sure. I think if he's going to play, but David Johnson sitting there at 7,500. Everyone's just coming out trashing the Oakland Raiders. I mean, that defense it's not good at all. We saw Melvin Gordon go nuts on them. We saw Marlon Mack the game before that go completely nuts on them. So I think you take your chances, especially with Byron Leftwich, the new OC in Arizona, committed to getting David Johnson the ball.
All right, so if it's not going to be David Johnson, we're going to talk about some of the rest of the guys up here at the top. So in order from the top, Melvin Gordon is the most expensive. He's $8,900, down $100 from last week playing the Raiders. After that, it's Saquon. Then it's Ezekiel Elliott. So you have that range of $8,500 and above. And below that, still in the $8,000 range, Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. I think people are going to be very gung-ho for McCaffrey here, and I'm going to have a tough time talking them out of him. But each of the top four guys, I guess maybe Melvin Gordon's not really in this boat, but Elliott, Barkley, and Kamara, you always have your Ingram problems with Kamara. Instead of getting that full workload, in some weeks it just doesn't matter because he continues to score and score and score. And then you have Barkley. Barkley's getting all this volume, but the yards per carry have been sort of atrocious the past 3 games, and it just seems like teams know, hey, we know you're going to run with Barkley. We're going to stop that down. Eli, please go beat us. Now, if you're the Niners, Eli can beat you, apparently. If you're anyone else, isn't this a problem for Barkley?
I don't think it's a huge problem for Barkley. I mean, he gets so many. Last game was weird because he didn't really get as many catches and receiving production as usual, but he still had a big play in that game. I don't think it's a huge deal, especially against a really bad defense, because he's going to get the ball one way or another, and especially on DraftKings when you're getting that full PPR. I'm fine with him in this spot. I think Ezekiel Elliott is a guy that really stands out just in a smash spot, just because of what we saw the Falcons give up to the Cleveland Browns. And just because we know that, Dan Quinn's scheme, every year they lead the league in receptions allowed to running backs. I mean, you had Nick Chubb, who hadn't really done anything in the passing game all season. He's catching touchdowns out here against Atlanta. So I think Zeke really kind of stands out, especially now that he's gotten right, these last couple games.
So let's say we end up seeing James Conner starting for the Steelers. I already talked Jalen Samuels is going to be a bigger part of this. I don't really buy that whatsoever. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell is gone. If Conner starts, we saw Conner in this spot, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where he was around the same price. No one wanted him. It was against the Ravens. Everyone was like, yeah, this is stupid. We don't want James Conner against the Ravens. It's too tough of a D. He ended up becoming the play from the top end, and no one owned him. Do you think he could fall into the same trap this week, especially if we don't get concrete information about him until, let's say, Friday?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this Jaguars defense really, they've been kind of hot and cold. Like sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, but it really hasn't materialized for them. They kind of held Marlon Mack in check last week, 12 carries for 29 yards, but they give up a 53-yard run to Jordan Wilkins. So they're a defense that's really tough to peg, but I think, James Conner is pretty matchup proof. So I think absolutely if it's kind of, he's going to be that lowest owned stud running back and he's playing. I mean, a concussion is not an injury that is going to limit a player in any way. If he's cleared, he's cleared. I think you roll with him at that price because he's essentially the same. He has the same upside as any other top 5 back.
Can you go to Mixon against the Ravens? Because I liked what I saw from Mixon against the Saints last week, but he just got scripted out of the game. Every time he touched the ball, he looked great. And then they were just down by 400 points. So they were like, screw this. Against the Ravens, who have been sneakily lit up by like McCaffrey and then Connor in back-to-back weeks. Maybe the bye week got them right on defense again, and they're closer to where they were at the beginning of the season. But if you can project this out to be a close game, which it should be, and then you have Mixon around, let's say, 18 to 22 touches, shouldn't that be enough to produce a good fantasy day? And he's going to be the guy above $7,000 that legit no one owns.
I think of the two, of Connor and Mixon, I think Connor is kind of the guy. Mixon, the one thing about Mixon is Giovanni Bernard is back, which gives them kind of more of an opportunity to script him out of the game. Just a little more uncertainty. I mean, when Gio was out, Mixon was getting over 90% of the work essentially. Last week, he still got 85% of the carries, but just a little more uncertainty. So I think Connor's kind of the guy there in that price range if you're looking for a low-owned stud back that's going to produce at the same level as the higher price guy.
So there's not very many running backs in the $5,000 to $7,000 range. Only 2 in the 6,000s. One is Leonard Fournette. The second one is Marlon Mack, who you just talked about, this time against Tennessee. And then you got like Carrion, AP, Coleman, Phillip Lindsay with Royce Freeman returning. So $5,200 is still not all that expensive. And then you have someone like, even Chris Thompson, who may or may not be back. Probably not, because the guy never ends up playing. Apparently his ribs are never going to heal, even with rest. So is there anyone from that range you like? Because I'm just looking at it, and I don't. Maybe Carrion, because Theo Riddick is playing the slot so much that Carrion is staying on the field and piling up some of these receptions, but I don't expect him to hit what he hit last week. So this feels like a dead range to me.
I mean, I think this is your tournament range. We've talked about this. I think last time, it's when you're in a tournament, you want to kind of find some of these mid-range plays because they give you this natural differentiation in terms of your roster construction that a lot of people that are kind of going high-low don't necessarily have. So, I mean, I think I do like Marlon Mack. I think that, last week was a down game for him, but they're using him a lot in the passing game and in the running game. I think you're going to see that continue as a home favorite against Tennessee. I think even Leonard Fournette argued his volume in his first game back was pretty crazy. I mean, he had the 20 carries. He was using the passing game, got an easy little pass for a touchdown at the goal line. So I think, Pittsburgh's a tough matchup, but Fournette's another guy, they're back at home. They always play Pittsburgh pretty tough. So I like Fournette in that spot. I like all of these guys actually in tournaments. I think Carrion's a little worrisome only because he got the 2 touchdowns last week. But if you saw the game, one of his touchdowns, LeGarrette Blount actually got 2 carries at the goal line and got stopped. And then Johnson got it in on the 3rd try on like a dive over the top of the pile. But let's say that doesn't happen every week. He's kind of volatile. So he's a guy that, doesn't make you feel as good. But I think Fournette and Mack, given the volume they're getting, are really strong plays.
Sub $5,000, Dion Lewis is the first one that really sticks out. Played 75% of the snaps last week, although Derrick Henry scored the 2 touchdowns. He now has 4 in the past 3 weeks. Okay, just see. I want to get your take on this. Mm-hmm. Is Derrick Henry basically LeGarrette Blount, but with 3 extra carries a game?
Man, the problem is with Derrick Henry is that in this day and age, he doesn't catch many passes. They don't use it in that way. And so when you have some of these bigger guys, especially on a team it's not like they're very pass heavy to begin with. I think you kind of tip the defense off a little bit to what's coming sometimes when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield. So he's not, they don't always use him as much. And the offensive coordinator came out and said they're not going to use him as much, but he's still a threat. I think when this offense is playing good to score touchdowns, he's better in like a standard fantasy league than DFS, but it does hurt Lewis a little bit just because now you're taking potential goal line work away from Lewis.
It takes away from Lewis, but Lewis is only $4,800. And if the Colts continue playing the sort of offense that they've been playing for the past month and a half at this similar pace, I would expect to see Dion Lewis again on the field, 70, 75, 80% of the offensive snaps. And if they actually have to score points in this game and catch up and play at a faster pace, he could be very highly utilized in the passing game. And if he has to concede a touchdown to Derrick Henry, that sucks, and that basically kills his cap in tournaments. But if you get one one of these games where Lewis is just on the field because they're playing a quicker pace. They don't have time to come in and bring in Derrick Henry for the goal line. All of a sudden, Dion Lewis is looking like the smash play that a lot of people thought he was last week. So at $4,800, it's just tough because there are so few options below $5,000 that you can really trust whatsoever. Like, any one of the Eagles backs do anything for you? Like, do you want to play any of them? Like, I would think that Smallwood would be the guy because he catches, but who knows with them?
Yeah, the Eagles backs to me are probably a hands off. I talked about this in the showdown breakdown that I do over at fantasylabs.com, which is like the Eagles backs right now. It's kind of turned into a three-way committee, and you have Josh Adams, who's been the best runner of the group, and they're starting to use him more in that role. He got about 50% of the carries last week, and they said he was going to, and the coach came out and said he was going to get more than that going forward. And then you have Smallwood, who's the best receiver, but he's the worst pass blocker. And then you have Corey Clement, who has been good in pass protection, but that doesn't really score you any fantasy points all the time. So it's kind of a situation that you really want to avoid. I mean, I'd just rather play Mark Ingram on the Saints. And, I know Philly is tough against running backs as well, but the Saints, the implied total for them in that game is sitting their way up there because it's a 55-point over-under. They're favored by 9 points. So you're looking at a team that's expected to score over 30. Mark Ingram could definitely be a part of that. So I'd rather, roll with him in that range or take a chance on somebody. Alex Collins is another one who he doesn't really strike you as a DraftKings play because he kind of seems like he's in that Derrick Henry boat a little bit. But if you look at the last three, the last few games, he's actually been handling about 80% of their carries, which is up from, earlier in the year where he was around that 50, 60% range. So I think he's kind of a sneaky play against this Bengals defense that just hasn't been able to stop anyone lately, got their defensive coordinator fired. This could be a game where Collins gets like a sneaky 2 touchdowns. He's at home, probably, going to be we'll see what happens with Joe Flacco. But, I mean, even if it's like Lamar Jackson out there, I don't think that's bad for the offense at all. So I think Collins is a really sneaky play.
Yeah, I think Collins is unaffected, really. He might even be better in terms of if Lamar Jackson ends up playing because they'll commit to the run. If they commit to the run, we're going to see Alex Collins on the field a whole lot more than Buck Allen, or maybe they try to integrate Ty Montgomery this week. I don't know. There's one thing I do have to point out for the viewers. Chris is hyping up Mark Ingram. That's fine for Chris to do. As the stance is on the Pat Mayo experience, this is a no Mark Ingram zone. If you play Mark Ingram, your team will be cursed, and you'll have to pay triple the entry fees. So watch out for that.
Except last week, though.
Did anyone play him last week? No.
I don't know. I mean,
when people want to play Mark Ingram, he sucks. When everyone's like, Mark Ingram's terrible, that's when he has good weeks. That's what Mark Ingram does.
Yeah, and I mean, this doesn't strike you as a Mark Ingram week, actually, because it's like, the Eagles have a tough D, but, as opposed to any of their Eagles backs, I'd play. Like on a showdown or something? Absolutely.
Fair enough. All right, so Lamar Miller, can we go back to Lamar Miller? He just absolutely tanked in Denver in a pretty juicy spot, really, before the bye week. Now they're coming out. They're at Washington. Washington's good on defense. They're solid on defense, but I don't even know how this passing game is going to work. I guess you integrate Demaryius Thomas over the bye. Kiki Cutie comes back, but I can see them leaning on the run here a little bit.
Yeah, they've definitely been trying to be a little more conservative with Deshaun Watson, him, running the ball less, throwing the ball less. His attempts have been down. So I think Miller, the problem with him, he's just tough to predict because there will be games where they'll give him essentially a 50-50 split with Alfred Blue. And it's kind of tough to predict when that will be. So you're kind of banking on Miller to be efficient, which hasn't always been the case, more so due to the offensive line, really, than any fault of his own. But he's not super exciting for me at that spot. I think, honestly, it sounds disgusting, but I'd rather play Doug Martin because John Gruden doesn't know that it's 2018. Like, he's using Doug Martin like the feature back that he was back in 2015. And so I think Arizona is a pretty soft matchup for running back. So I could see Doug Martin get, kind of eating just, out of nowhere. So I wouldn't be scared to use Martin in that spot over Miller. I think I actually feel better about Martin's usage than I do Miller's. Like
Mark Ingram, Doug Martin is on the banned list. Cannot be played. He's too terrible. The guy's dust. The guy is just. They give him like 8 tries from the 1-yard line every single week, and he's yet to score a touchdown. Jalen Richard is the guy. Got to play Jalen Richard. Not in tournaments, obviously, but if you're going to play cash, you can play Jalen Richard has outscored Doug Martin 2 of the 3 weeks since Marshawn Lynch has went out. That's how bad Doug Martin is.
I don't know. I mean, I think I was pretty low on Doug Martin coming into the year, obviously, but I think he works out right. To be like, all right, how about this though? How about this stat? Like we all kind of get on Doug Martin for the the yards per carry, these last couple years. The last 3 games, he's at 5.5, 4.5, 4.1. Like he's moving the ball. I don't think like the goal line trips are hard to like. It's a lot of noise and variance because there's so few of a sample. But I mean, he's getting multiple targets. Catching 3 balls for 31 last game, 1 for 20. Like I think he's again a sneaky play. Like I'm not excited about him, but if you're in a tournament and you're getting him at like 5% ownership, this is a guy who could have 20 touches for 100 yards and a touch easily.
This easily said. For anything is not easy for Doug Martin except for treating the osteo. Listen, if you can treat the osteoporosis in his hip, he'll be fine. Guy's an old man, although I'm like 5 years older than him. I'm also an old man. He's old for NFL terms right now.
He's fine. Frank Gore's out here killing.
Yeah, you ever playing Frank Gore? No.
I might have to if Kenyon Drake's still banged up coming off the bye.
Oh, the bye week. Well, he's a young man. He'll heal very quickly. I do have to ask you about the Broncos backfield. Can you go to any of them? Because Lindsey looks like he'll be the guy, but will he be more than 50% of all snaps the guy?
Lindsey's a guy. He's for the season. He's at about like 53% of the carries for that backfield, and then he's getting about 9% of the targets. So he has it's decent usage, but if Freeman's back in that mix, it's hard. It's going to be hard to kind of peg exactly how it's going to break down. Freeman's been out for so long, so I don't love Lindsey, but he's been extremely efficient when he's touched the ball, and I think. Anytime you have a guy like that in a tournament, like I would never tell people not to play him because, that efficiency is obviously what's going to win you a tournament. And the Chargers' run defense is not great at all. So that's their kind of weakness. They're like middle of the pack in run DVOA. They're in the top 10 in pass DVOA. So I do think the Broncos' backs will be used, but anytime it's like 3 guys and you don't really know which guy's going to get the usage, it's a situation I'd rather avoid.
Yeah, same with me. Although Denzel Perryman being out on the Chargers defense should open up more running lanes. That's what we saw at the beginning of last season when Perryman was out too, that teams were able to exploit. Yeah. And that was even when Bosa was still in, that they were still able to exploit them on the ground. Last guy, Theo Riddick, can you use him in cash, $4,000?
I tend to not use those kind of guys in cash games because I was just rewatching the Lions game from last week actually, and Theo Riddick numbers looked fine, but it was kind of concerning. I don't remember him touching the ball until the fourth quarter, or definitely not until the second half, until they were kind of down. And I mean, the Bears did get up on him really quickly, but Theo Riddick just didn't seem like a integral part of the game plan. Now, I don't know if that was opponent specific or not, but either way, that's like a little bit risky for a cash play. Like I think at running back in cash games, you usually like Deion Lewis. I think you just kind of go with him as your cheapest back if you're going to go that route because Lewis, even though he didn't really smash last week, he got 20 carries, which is all you could hope for. You're going to have these games where a running back gets volume and doesn't hit, like we saw Kareem Hunt. That happened with Hunt. He was in a really good spot, just didn't get the touchdown, didn't end up paying off. But Riddick is a guy. I mean, he could end up with 4 or 5 touches just in like 4 receptions, and he's not really getting the handoffs either because he's never really been a good runner. So maybe that's why. But he's just I think a little too hard to trust, even though it's full PPR.
All right, let's switch to receivers. Michael Thomas comes in at $8,800 in this glorious matchup. I'm more intrigued by the other side of the ball, to be perfectly honest with you. So let's talk about that game. We'll talk about stacks at the very end, but this New Orleans-Philadelphia game, I'm trying to pick the right pieces of it to get maximum exposure. But I like the Carson Wentz over Drew Brees play only because I think when the Saints are rolling, and we've seen this over the past 2 seasons, this season, last season, that when they're up and when they're in control of games, I know Armstead's going to be out on the offensive line, so maybe it hurts their run D just a little bit, that they do like to run the ball, and they want to control the clock. They want to pound these games out and just get out of there with a win. Now, a lot of the times they'll do all their scoring in the first half, then they'll turn around and hand it to Ingram, hand it to Kamara, be on their way. But even when they're near the goal line, they're doing the same thing. Philly can't run, and they're going to be down in this game. But Carson Wentz, although he doesn't look like MVP Carson Wentz, is still just putting up these crazy touchdown numbers because all he does is throw to Zach Ertz every single time. So is the best stack on the board Wentz, Alshon, and Ertz if you can afford it?
Oof. I wouldn't say the best stack on the board. I mean, I think like you can't fall into the trap of locking yourself into what you think a particular game script will be. I mean, like, yeah, the Saints are big favorites, but this could go a lot of ways. I think, Drew Brees at home with an implied total over 30. I still like Drew Brees the much more in this game. He's just dealing. I think that the Eagles, Ertz is probably the play. The wide receivers are going to be a little tough to kind of decipher because, Golden Tate wasn't really involved in that first game on just getting over there on the trade from the Lions. But I would imagine that going forward, he's going to be a lot more heavily involved. And, I don't know if that hurts Ertz as much because Ertz is just, another guy that's just so integral and, Wentz, always has had a good rapport with him. But Alshon Jeffrey is a guy who it's hard to, like, if he's going to be low owned, sure. But he's kind of hard to pay. He could be the guy that ends up losing out on some targets along with Aguilar. But Aguilar was still playing a lot of snaps. So, I like the Wentz stack, but I would go Breeze like over Wentz in this game still because just the outrageous play of Breeze, the weapons he has, the fact that he could throw to a guy like Kamara and Kamara could do all the work for him, or Ingram, which we saw last week. I still like Breeze in that game.
All right, so I mean, we might have to make some sort of side wager. Total DK points this week. Breeze versus Wentz. Maybe we'll talk about that. Talk about that. We can talk about it right now. Do you want to go $50 on this?
50 that Drew Brees just has to outscore Wentz in DK points?
Yeah, I'll take Wentz.
Oh, we can do that. Yeah, we'll get some little side action. $50.
Boom, deal. Here we go. Maybe that should have been the giveaway too. That I just said, who has more points? And maybe just let us know in the comments. It's not for a giveaway. Who do you got? You got Brees. You got Wentz. I just looked at. There's a way that Brees can be scripted out of it. I'm not saying he's going to be. And maybe the way that he gets scripted out of it is that he's so good that he piles up all these points. That's definitely on the table. But Wentz can't be because they can't run.
I have Brees as my number 2 quarterback this week. I think he's gonna smash. I mean, the Eagles defense, and again, like matchups are tough. A lot of noise in the data, but like the Eagles have been a very high floor matchup for quarterbacks. I mean, after Matt Ryan kind of came in there and stunk it up that first week, I mean, Ryan Fitz goes for 404 the next week. You had Mariota 344, Cousins 301. Manning. Couple 281, like Newton, a couple of touchdowns. Like everyone was just, I don't know. It's just, I think Brees in the dome is just gonna just destroy them.
Well, he very well may. And full disclosure, I have Brees as my number 3 quarterback this week. I go Mahomes, Wentz, Brees, 1, 2, 3.
Ooh, so you're high on Wentz. You're all over Wentz this week. Because
I love Wentz. He's great.
Where do you have? I know he is. He's It's weird because people aren't talking about it, but he's playing at this MVP level again. Where are you on Goff? Then you have Goff like 4th, or are you lower on?
Yeah, I got Mahomes, Wentz, Brees, Goff, Cam, Luck, Rodgers, Wilson.
That's fair.
Although the one that, we'll talk about this when we talk about quarterbacks, but Deshaun Watson's really the one who intrigues me, and that kind of plays into, do I want to pay all the way up for Michael Thomas at his number, which I kind of do, and then you have like Julio, you have Beckham, but then you have DeAndre Hopkins at $7,900. I have a note in my office that says every time that DeAndre is below $8,000, play him.
Yeah, I think we had that. I think this last time I was on the show, we actually had a similar situation. And I think I talked about the same thing. We talked about the same thing, and it was he has like a extremely ridiculous plus minus on average when he's under 8K. So I think he's the player. I mean, Michael Thomas at 8,800. That is a lot. I mean, Philly gets destroyed by number one receivers. They're kind of banged up at cornerback. So I totally get it, but especially at receiver when I can, I try not to pay all the way up because the floors for receivers are still lower because like an $8,800 receiver is going to touch the ball like on average, 10 times less or half the time or a third of what like a running back that costs that much would be.
And with the way that we were just talking about running backs, like if Dion Lewis is going to be your like lowest like safe option and he's still $4,800, you're going to want to pay up at running back, or at least into the mid-tier at running back, that being able to afford a whole bunch of high-end receivers, well, that could be the contrarian move in some tournaments in a way to construct some lineups. Is probably not the optimal build of what you want to do. So I think starting with DeAndre is really good. Like I like Beckham, I like Julio, I like Thomas, but if I can get those savings, I like DeAndre Hopkins just as much. And frankly, he might get a higher volume share than all of these guys because I don't know how DT is going to look in this offense with Cutie back. Is Cutie going to be used a bunch? I don't know. Maybe Deshaun Watson will drop back and say, you know what? I know the guy who catches the ball. No matter where I throw it, I'll throw to him. And he's being shadowed by Josh Norman. And people are playing that up like that's a big deal. Come on. This isn't 2005. It's going to be fine. And DeAndre Hopkins overcomes every terrible matchup he has. So he's my smash play from the top. The two I'm really interested in, Evans and Boyd, 73, 7,000, only because they're coming off really shit weeks that no one's going to want to use them.
You know, Boyd, I kind of warned about this. I was talking to my dude Matthew Freeman on the Action Network NFL pod last Friday, and Boyd was a guy that I didn't think he was a great play last week either because, like, if AJ Green is out, like AJ Green is a guy who is one of the scariest receivers for opposing defensive coordinators to face, right? So when he's out, now you free up all of these resources to concentrate on taking the team's, top receiving weapon out of the game, who's Tyler Boyd, which changes the whole dynamic of the offense and of the whole dynamic of Boyd. So like, if AJ Green's out, I actually like Boyd less because there's no one to take the coverage away. Like he's just gonna have a target on his back. So I think I'd much rather go with Mike Evans in this spot because Evans is a guy who he's just like your quintessential tournament play where he's a high volume guy who gets a lot of air yards. He knows how to score touchdowns. But sometimes it's just not there for him. There's a lot of weapons on the offense. He's not the fastest guy, so sometimes he just gets kind of messed up by certain defensive backs. But Ryan Fitzpatrick is throwing for 400 or 500 yards every game. Evans is still their number one receiver. So there's going to be games where he gets, a 25-30% share of those yards, and we've seen that already, and multiple times this season he's going to have monster games. So give me Evans there over Boyd.
Sub $7,000 into the 5,000s. Obviously, I like Alshon. I've mentioned that already. I like T.Y. Hilton. I always like T.Y. Hilton whenever you can get him on the fast track at home. He even put up some decent numbers last week, and no one was really expecting that up against Jalen Ramsey. But, hey, he ended up coming through in the clutch for us there. Corey Davis is going to be the interesting one on the other side of the ball because I talk about that Philadelphia stack. The problem with the Indy stack, if you're going to use luck, is you have to hit the tight end correctly. I think they've thrown 14 or 16 touchdowns to tight end so far this season. That spans like 5 guys. That it's tough playing the Hilton and Luck stack solely because Hilton might not be involved in. He might have to score the touchdowns from deep, which would be perfect for the stack itself. But Luck by himself, if you don't go with any of the tight ends, may be the move. But if you bring Corey Davis back on the other side, if you don't use Dion Lewis, is he going to be viable again this week? Because you see the huge bump up in price. You see the huge bump up. I mean, the volume has stayed the same every single week, but he's coming off a week where everyone watched him do it at a chalky ownership against the Patriots. Is this a good week to fade Corey Davis, knowing that he's just unpredictable?
In a tournament, yeah. I mean, I think so. In tournaments, I think you always want to fade the chalk at receiver because there's so many options. Like at running back, everyone kind of knows the top guys that are going to smash, and more often than not, they smash. And it's like you might as well not like waste a whole bunch of entries trying to figure out which like contrarian running back backfield combination is going to hit when you could kind of lock in a lot more, ceiling floor with the running backs, and then you kind of pivot at the wide receiver spots because, I mean, they're just, every team is playing, there's like 40 viable options, I would say, like in a given week. So anyone who's projected to be high owned, which Davis looks like he'll have at least, I would say into the mid double digits probably. I think you do want to fade play him in that spot just solely because of that, because, even if he goes off, there's other players that you could replicate that production with, which is not always true at running back outside of the few guys who are already going to be chalked.
If Golden Tate plays more than 29% of the snaps, which he saw last week, obviously he becomes a bit better of a play, and I assume that takes away from Aguilar, who ended up playing 89% of the snaps, or it could be Jordan Matthews, who played 61% last week. But like I'm saying, I want to get exposure to this passing game with the Eagles, and maybe everyone's going to be with me on Wentz, on Ertz, on Alshon, that I need to be looking for those other players. What would you set the over-under at in snap share for Golden Tate this week against the Saints?
I would set the over-under at 60%, which is around what I would like a floor of like the Eagles pass play rate. So I expect that he'll be a full-time receiver for them on passing downs this week now that he's had a week to prepare.
Would that make you want to play him?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the Saints have been getting destroyed in the slot. I know they're going to move Tate around. But yeah, on DraftKings, sure, I'd play Golden Tate because he's liable to, in a tournament, like let's be clear. But yeah, like he's liable to catch 10 balls for 120 yards in this game, just like he's liable to play another 29% of snaps. But the thing is, I mean, at least right now, so on Fantasy Labs, we have him projected for 2 to 4% ownership. I don't know if that's going to change after everyone hears us talking about it right now, but if he's going to be at that ownership, then sure, I think you do play him in that game because he has the leverage on the other guys, which are probably going to be more popular, like Alshon and Zach Ertz. If he's scoring touchdowns or catching passes and taking yardage away from them, that obviously helps you out. So I have no problems with Tate.
All right, so finally from this range, you got both the Lions guys are in there, and if we go to the very top, you got Juju and Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen finally broke his scoreless streak last week. Now he goes up against the Broncos. You'd think that if they move him to the slot, Chris Harris will be on him, but you can just move him off of Chris Harris. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. I don't know where his ownership is going to come in, but at $6,700, it's almost like the Hopkins thing. Like, why are we getting a discount on Keenan Allen?
It's got to be the matchup against Denver, I think. Like you alluded to, Chris Harris, when he does go in the slot, is a tough matchup. Allen, this is like we have him projected for pretty high ownership right now, 17 to 20%. And I think that's because you're getting the price drop. You're getting him coming off a big game. He is too cheap, like in terms of just like what his median projection would be relative to his salary. But, I don't love the spot because he's going to be high owned. The matchup isn't amazing. So I'd probably try to, play a guy like Juju who, the Jaguars aren't great covering slot receivers anymore. That's just not their real strength. So even though they still have a pretty good pass defense, Juju's a guy who, we saw it was like the first play of the game last week, just housed it. So he's a guy that with a ton of upside that will probably not be owned like it. So I actually love Juju as like a bit of a contrarian play in that spot.
Of the Lions guys, you got Golladay, you got Marv Jones.
Well, if Marv Jones is playing, I think that actually helps Golladay a little because it's the defense has to kind of contend with Marv Jones again. Like when you have these situations where all of a sudden a receiver that's never been the focal point of a defense starts to be the focal point of a defense, that's when I kind of get worried. So I think if Jones plays, I like Golladay more. If Jones is out, I think Golladay will be extremely chalky, in which case I think then you want to think about fading him.
Amari Cooper and Sterling Shepard are right there at the bottom of the $5,000 range as well. I don't think that Cooper's all that great, but they're making a concerted effort to get him the ball in Dallas, and this is a primo matchup against Atlanta. And then even if you drop down, you have Sterling Shepard right there. Yeah, last week didn't really work out for anyone in that stupid Bucs and Redskins game, but even Eli can be able to beat the Bucs defense, can he?
You would think, Shepard's a guy that's just another guy that's kind of tough to peg. I think it makes sense in a little bit of sense. His price is a little up there though. Like I don't love him. I don't really love anything about him except the fact that he has leverage on guys like Odell and Ingram and even Barkley who are going to be higher owned. But at that price, you would like a little more kind of locked in volume just because, again, you never know if they could play like a 16-3 game like the Redskins and Bucs did last week. And you kind of be out in the cold. So don't love Shepard. I think Cooper actually has a lot more upside just because, Dallas has already been making a concerted effort to get him the ball. And if this game turns into one of those games where Matt Ryan's doing his thing again and it turns into another shootout, you could see a really, really big game from Cooper just because of the game script.
Sub $5,000. It gets pretty dicey pretty quickly here. So I think that if you mention that Keenan Allen's going to be very highly owned, one of the pivots off of him just might be paying for Tyrell Williams, who just has these big plays in him that you only need one or two, and boom, he's paid off his price. He's taking away from the bottom line of Keenan Allen. You can box people out that way if you wanted to, and he comes at a substantially cheaper price at $4,800. The other one that I'm very really intrigued with is on the other side of the ball. Everyone lined up to play chalky Cortland Sutton. That didn't work out whatsoever. But now coming off a bye week, he's still only $4,600. He's going to have a huge target share in this offense, probably around 20 to 30%. It's going to be Sanders, and it's going to be him and Hewerman. That's it. And whoever they decide to chuck to in the backfield. Is this the time to go back to Sutton after everyone has become disenfranchised with him and won't play him this week?
It could be. I'm not like in love with it. I like the thinking behind it. Like I love playing guys, after they were the chalk and they kind of busted, because you usually get some, as you mentioned, like a discount on ownership, and you're still getting the same kind of player. But the Chargers are a tough matchup, I think, for receivers. They tend to cover well. They had some hiccups earlier in the year, and every once in a while you'll see them give up like a random big game to Tajay Sharp or whoever not. But, I don't have a lot of confidence, I guess, like that this is going to be the week for Sutton. I mean, we've never really seen that target share increase yet. Like we're projecting it, but he's been around that 13%, pretty much, whether, Demaryius is there in the game he was out, he didn't really see a huge increase. So I'm kind of like on a wait, like prove it mode with Sutton at this point.
Well, is there anyone else from that like lower 4 into the 3s that you can see yourself playing in tournaments? 'Cause I was looking at, I've been playing Brandon LaFell every week like an idiot, but like he's so cheap, and he's the one Raider I don't just actively despise. And again, he's one of these guys that he's so old that John Gruden likes him a lot, but he might draw Patrick Peterson this week against Arizona, so that's not great. Traquan as the low owned guy on the Saints side of the ball, knowing that the Eagles are down their top 3 corners, that he can just be the deep guy that gets behind everyone?
Yeah, I like Traquan a lot more. I think, he's still the, number 2 receiver on the New Orleans Saints. He, the Eagles tend to be a tough matchup for opposing tight ends. So, it might not be like a big week for Ben Watson or any of those guys. So, yeah, I think Traquan Smith is definitely a viable play in that range. I think if you look, there's Michael Crabtree still out here at 4,800. He hasn't been very efficient, but the targets have been there for him. So I think you could look to him. John Ross is another one. I mean, he's another one that no one really wants to play anymore, but he got in the end zone. He's gotten in the end zone a few times this year when he has been on the field. Been a low volume guy, but at any point in time he could break a big play. The Ravens don't look like an exciting matchup to play people against, so I think people will be kind of off him. So I could definitely get behind Ross. Chris Godwin, he's another guy every week. I mean, he's liable for 100 yards and a touchdown. It's just you don't know who it's going to always be on the Bucs but the bottom line is they're putting up 400 yards plus a game. And you're getting a receiver for them for 4,300. I think you want to take that, especially the Giants can't really cover anyone. I mean, I know, San Francisco didn't really challenge them too much, but I think this Bucs offense will be a whole different beast. So I think Godwin, Crabtree, Ross, Traquan, those are the guys I'm looking at right now.
Do we worry that Lamar Jackson's just not good and he could kill all these guys on the Ravens offense?
Absolutely. I think, you always worry about that, but he could also be really good. If we're talking tournaments, I think you definitely take your chances with him because he could kind of make some off-script plays. That actually would also help, probably help John Brown a little bit because, those off-script plays, maybe you get one deep. But, Crabtree, I was pretty low on him coming into the year, and he's kind of, for the most part, done what I expected, which is just been inefficient. But anytime you're on DraftKings and you have these guys that in any given game, they could get, 10, 11 targets, they get red zone targets. I mean, you could have one of these ugly games where it's like, but it ends up with like 11 catches for 110 yards or something ridiculous like that. So I don't hate Crabtree in this spot. The Bengals defense has not been good. I mean, again, they got their defensive coordinator fired just this week. So I wouldn't hesitate to play anyone against the Ravens, especially if Flacco's out, because I think people will kind of be a little bit nervous.
So quarterbacks, I mean, let's start it off. Would you play Lamar Jackson?
Absolutely. If you're getting rushing production, that's always important on DraftKings. Lamar Jackson is going to run the ball for you. That's about all you can ask for a quarterback, at his price point. And he's going to give you some upside too. I mean, I think he's, at that price, 4,700, like you're getting the upside of a guy who like could throw 2 touchdowns, maybe run for 1, and give you a decent amount of rushing yardage. So I think you play him if he starts, and you just kind of take your chances. But obviously the safer play, you have Deshaun Watson there at 5,700, who I think is not going to be like super chalk, just because you also have this huge total in the Philly New Orleans game, which is going to take a lot of ownership. You have Cam at a pretty decent price. So I don't think like Watson, especially with Will Fuller out, is going to be like this really chalky play. At which point, he always becomes a great play. I mean, I think he's like a top 6 fantasy quarterback pretty much anytime he suits up. So I like Watson if you're paying up a little more.
Yeah, I'm with you on Watson. Wentz is just overall my price per dollar favorite play because Mahomes is off this slate. So I like Wentz at the $6,300 price tag. He's going to be popular, though. I know that. So if you want to get into other plays and talk tournament, Deshaun Watson is one of them. I like Andrew Luck a lot. And then if we're going to pay down, I mean, paying all the way down for Lamar Jackson, I think can make some sense. I think Rosen's actually in a nice spot to break out at $4,800, but I think at 52 is the guy that could swing tournaments, and it's Dak Prescott.
Oh yeah, Dak we've seen his numbers kind of improve. Like first it was he started running the ball a little bit more, and so we saw his numbers kind of improve because of that. We saw him with the big game against Jacksonville, and then now he's got Amari Cooper, who's better than what he's had before. They're also playing Michael Gallup is another receiver should have mentioned in that lower price tier. He's playing over 80% of the snaps now, so I think they're kind of a little better in terms of the supporting cast. Zeke Elliott got going. So, yeah, I think Dak is in a really good spot. And let's not forget, he's been, a consistent, like, top 12-ish, like a QB1 in fantasy for most of his career. And so, this year he just kind of started off on the wrong foot. That offense was in flux. They were trying to get used to life after Dez and Witten and all those guys. But, Dak has, 21 or more DraftKings points in 3 of his last 4 games. I don't think you can ignore that rushing upside. You like him and like another guy a little higher who no one's probably going to play because Ryan Fitzpatrick is 100 more is Marcus Mariota. But he's another guy that, if Corey Davis is going to get all this ownership, you might want to just play Mariota either with him or just don't stack him at all, because Mariota is another guy who has this rushing upside that we forget about. But he's a guy that will run the ball, and he could kind of give you what Dak gives you if that game turns into a higher scoring game, because Luck is putting up points on the other side.
The one thing I guess I'd say is it's hard to – some running backs you can play with the quarterbacks because they get so involved in the passing game, and Elliott is kind of like that. We have these games where Ezekiel is just, hey, let's just throw some dump-offs. And we know how running backs can kill Atlanta through the air. The problem I have with playing Dak and Zeke together is what I need Dak to do to win me a tournament directly takes away from Zeke, and it's those goal line rushes that Dak calls for himself that I don't think you can play them together.
I agree, and I think that's another reason to play to play a guy like Mariota too, because a lot of people are going to have Lewis, and Lewis, we still want, if he's going to play in a tournament, we still need him to probably score a rushing touchdown. So I totally agree. I don't think you want to necessarily stack them, but I think if you stack Dak, I think you go with Amari Cooper, or if you really want to be contrarian and try to get a leg up in a large field, you take a chance on Michael Gallup.
Switch to tight end. Zach Ertz comes in at number 1. He's $6,600, $1,600 more than the next closest one. That's Greg Olsen up against Detroit, who's not a terrible play by any means. O.J. Howard, Austin Hooper, Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle, Evan Ingram, Vance McDonald. Then all of a sudden we're into the $3,000 area. So if you're not going to play Ertz, let's just cross him off the board because he's super expensive. So if you're not going to play him, you've decided not to play Ertz, which you probably should. Who is it that you go to after him? I'm having a real tough time here.
Eric Ebron. Absolutely. Like there's no other tight end that's had that kind of upside this year than Eric Ebron. And I still don't think he's going to be high owned because his price came up and people know that he's playing. Most people know that he's playing only about 30-40% of the snap. But the thing is, it's not just about the snaps. It's about the routes and the targets per snap and the targets per route. And the bottom line is, every time they get into the red zone, Andrew Luck's looking for Ebron. And so I think that you play Ebron's the best play if you pivot off Ertz. Jack Doyle's the second best play if you pivot off Ertz. and Mo Alley Cox is the third best play if you pick it up.
Could you pay down for any of these other guys? Like Ricky Seals-Jones is down here in a great matchup. But my guy Uzuma just keeps doing nothing, but he's so cheap now.
Yeah, like Usama is like, this will probably be the week where Usama scores a touchdown or like gets like a 7 for like 96 kind of game because like no one's going to be on him anymore. But I do like Seals-Jones at 2,900. The bottom line is that's just too cheap for him considering his target share and his air yard share. He's getting a decent amount of air yards. He's getting about 16-17% of the targets as well for Rosen. And so, this Oakland defense, again, it's just a really poor defense that anyone, like it's a get right spot for pretty much any team and any player. And so you have a guy like Seals-Jones who hasn't been the most efficient this year, but 23% air yard market share. That's a lot of air yards against the worst or bottom 3 defense in the league for 2,900. So I do love Ricky RSJ this week.
Jeff Heuerman, he is coming off the 10-catch game. They had the bye week. Are people going to jump on him at this price, or are they just unconvinced? Because I can go either way. If he's going to be super chalky, I understand the fade. But if he's going to come in low owned, that's where I can save some money.
I do. So I don't really like to play tight ends against the Chargers. They tend to. I think they gave up a big game or two this year to the tight end, but for the most part, they do a really good job covering a tight end. So last week, who did he have the big game against? Was it Denver? It was Denver. No, excuse me. Houston, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, when Denver played Houston is actually really poor in DVOA versus the tight end. I don't know. Let me see where they are now. They look like I think they're bottom 3, like 29th or something. So that game was they're 31st now against the tight end. And LA, the Chargers are first. So like they're just a much tougher matchup. I think that like against Houston, that was a time to play Heuerman. I think this week is a time to fade him, especially because his ownership will probably be more than it would have been if he hadn't had that big game. So I mean, I think you go with Jordan Reed is $100 more, and he's playing Houston. Like he's playing the team that essentially woke Heuerman up from the dead. So I think you just go back to Jordan Reed here.
Yeah. I feel like Jordan Reed's fallen into the Jarvis Landry trap, where it's all volume, no production.
No, I mean that's definitely true. But like we know that from volume comes production at some point, and I think if you're talking about a tournament upside here, I don't think the ownership is going to be that different between Heuerman and Reed that like you're giving up so much to get Reed. I mean, I think you kind of hint on it with Usama though. If anyone's the play here to try to be contrarian, it's got to be Usama because the Bengals still without AJ Green. We're gonna have Tyler Boyd a focal point. Like that just doesn't make me comfortable. Like Tyler Boyd, the focal point of the Baltimore Ravens defense. Like so, somebody else is probably gonna have to produce. Like the rest of these Bengals receivers really haven't done much at all. It's got to be Ross or Usama outside of the running back. So I think he's probably that contrarian play if you're really looking for low ownership.
Yeah, and Baltimore 19th in DVOA against the tight end. The bottom 5 overall, the worst is Oakland, then Houston, then Detroit, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. I guess the last one, again, we talked a little bit about Sterling Shepard, and we saw his market share go way down as soon as Evan Ingram came back. Not that Ingram's is spiking out of control, but this does seem to be a very good matchup for him this week.
Yeah, I think Ingram is definitely in play here. He's kind of had a bit of a slow start to the season. He missed some time with the injuries, but I like what I saw from him at the end of that, kind of at the end of the Giants game, but I didn't like what I saw for he was another guy. They just like ignored him for like 3 quarters. And then in the fourth quarter, Eli's like, oh yeah, I got this guy, this athletic tight end. And he starts throwing him deep balls and deep posts and whatnot. So, another guy really tough to predict. Target share a little down from last year when they didn't have Beckham, but still huge upside. I think he's a guy that you wait and see how the ownership projects. I've seen him all over the map. Like I've seen some people have him ranked in like the top 6 tight ends for this week. I've seen other, he's ranked right in his normal, type like 13th, 14th range. So depending on the ownership, I think that's how you ultimately decide on Ingram. But the upside is definitely is definitely there.
Defenses to close this out. It's almost like at tight end where there's the wrong teams are on bye. The teams we love to pick on in terms of fantasy defenses are all not playing this week, or they're all on primetime slates. So do we just pay down and hope for the best with one of these defenses? Or do we just say, screw it, use the Cardinals against the Raiders, 3,100?
Yeah, I think the Cardinals are probably the safest mix of okay, they're going against a bad team and, they're not a terrible defense. That's kind of been a little bit lost in the fact that the Cardinals have struggled a lot for the most part this season, and their offense hasn't been where it was supposed to be, but they are the number 6 overall defense in DVOA. And I think anytime you can get a top 6 defense going against a dumpster fire team where it's just everything's going wrong for Oakland, and, obviously they're without, Amari Cooper, they're without Marshawn Lynch. So I think that's still the safest. I don't feel great about it, but not really feeling too great about. I think you could maybe consider Pittsburgh. 2,900 at Jacksonville. They're on the road, so Pittsburgh has these times on the road where they're not very good. But the defense has been a lot better recently, and the Jags offense. I mean, they still have Blake Bortles there, so they could still be some problems. So I think you can maybe get away with Pittsburgh, but I'd probably lean Arizona if you're not going to the Chargers at 3,400.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even that big on the Chargers this week. Until Bosa comes back, I'm still very dubious about the amount of pressure that they generate over and over. Even just looking at the total sacks right now and adjusted sack rate, they're 18th in a defensive line adjusted sack rate. That's not great. So for me, I like Arizona. I like Pittsburgh with you. One of the names that I forgot to bring up in the tight end section, my main man, James O'Shaughnessy. It's $2,600. He played 70% of the offensive snaps this week. He's on the field a lot because when Fournette's on the field, they like to have their best blocking tight end out there. But when they fall behind, they just let him run routes. And he ends up with 6-7 targets. And he got a touchdown last year in the playoffs against the Steelers as well. So as an absolute punt play for $0, he's someone that you can consider. The other one that I was looking at here, Tampa Bay at the Giants. They're 11th in DVOA adjusted sack rate right now, 21 sacks on the season. The other one would be Houston, 13th, and the defensive line they have. And with Washington, they have no offensive line left. It didn't translate last week when the Bucs played Washington at home, but it could translate this week with a healthy Houston defensive line coming at Alex Smith.
Yeah, I actually like that. Historically, I've tended to fade defenses against Alex Smith only because he doesn't really throw picks. He's he's too safe. But one thing that he has shown, is through his career is that if the play's not there, he will take a sack. And from that angle, I think, there's not a lot to hang your hat on with these defenses. So if you can kind of count on a few sacks out of a defense, I think that you can play them, but you're right. It's not a great week for defenses. I'm just looking up and down this list, and it is ugly. I don't think Tampa Bay is a defense that I would consider playing just because the likelihood of them giving you negative points is, I would say, pretty high. Not only because they're a poor defense, but because their offense is so good that it forces opponents to play really aggressively. And I mean, except for Alex Smith and the Redskins last week, it generally forces opponents to play aggressively because they have to kind of score points as well. So Tampa Bay kind of off the table for me, but I could definitely see Houston there at 2,600.
Yeah, I was even thinking Indy at home just because they'll be able to take so many shots at Mariota, maybe force them into bad situations. But their sack rate has gone way down as the season has gone along. So it's really difficult to tell with them. Finally, stacks. Before we get out of here, obviously that New Orleans-Philadelphia game is the game that everyone's going after. 55-point game total, the highest on the main slate. The second highest is Bucs-Giants. The third highest, the only other one above 50 right now, is Carolina in Detroit. Is that the sneaky stack game that no one's going to go after?
I think it might be, depending on what happens with Marvin Jones and these guys. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of viability to do that. I mean, Greg Olsen's in a good spot, but his price is such that I don't think people are really going to pay up for $5K for him because he's in this, you have guys like OJ Howard, and you can just go to Zach Ertz if you're going to really pay up or pay down for some of these other guys. So I think a Cam to like Olsen stack, or just playing Cam by himself. The whole thing about Cam is you don't really need to stack him. Excuse me, because he, like you said with Dak, like what you really want Cam to do is get the 6-point rushing touchdowns, not the 4-point passing touchdown, right? So from that angle, I think you just play Cam and maybe run it back with Kenny Golladay or somebody like that. Matthew Stafford, the upside just hasn't been there for him. So not really excited about stacking Matthew Stafford with anyone at this point. But I think this game in general, just for the amount of points that are expected, will be a little under-owned in general.
It will be. I mean, one thing to look at in terms of pace, and my good friend Gary and Thorne is pointing this out on the show like week after week. Detroit's just really slow on offense, and people are more factoring in how they've looked the past few years where they're kind of up-tempo, throwing a bunch of short passes. They're just not that team right now.
No, Matt Patricia has really made a concerted effort to kind of turn this team into a more balanced team, a more run-heavy team. And also, I'm pretty sure he kind of has looked at that defense and said, hey, we're not that good on defense. There's no reason for us to pick up the pace and we get a 3-and-out and put our defense back on the field and they're gassed on top of not being that good. So I think that Detroit is going to continue to play how they play. They're a bad defense, especially when you have a guy like Darius Slay out of there. So, definitely a defense that can be exploited. But, as far as like who are we stacking against them, I think it's not like nothing jumps out aside from maybe a Cam Olsen. I think you just go with Cam here as kind of a pivot of some of these other quarterbacks.
Yeah, you could go with Cam. I guess the one route you could go if you want a big play upside is DJ Moore gets no love inside of the red zone, but when he does score, it's from deep. And he's another one of these chalk busts that when everyone hyped him up, he did absolutely nothing. If Torrey Smith misses this game again, he's going to continue to be on the field. He's not a safe play by any means, but he is one with high upside.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player. And so anytime you have a good player, at low ownership and he's kind of, his price is going to come up at some point. So I think that's a pretty good call. Curtis Samuel's been a lot more involved lately too. And they've been trying to get him the ball in the run game, in the pass game a bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see his role continue to expand. So I think those actually are some sneaky plays, especially because, that's really if you're not going to get rushing touchdowns from Cam, but you're stacking them, you do want some of those long touchdowns to kind of get his yardage up there. So I don't hate that at all.
Okay, that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. Week 11 DraftKings picks and preview. You can find my cheat sheet up on DKPlaybook.com. And if you love the video so much, I suggest you try the audio version. We're trying to get to 10 million downloads for the year. So please, even if you just watch, go subscribe to the audio version. Apple, Android, doesn't matter. Just download it, then scrap it. You don't need to listen to it twice, unless you want to. Raybon brought some pretty top-notch information, so maybe you just go do that. Then go over to Action Network and Fantasy Labs and find out what Raybon's up to. What do you got coming out later this week and over the weekend?
So we got the Thursday night showdown breakdown, of course, Packers, Seahawks. That should be a good one. That's free every week. The Thursday night on Fantasy Labs. I just kind of go through all the showdown picks and strategy, and then got all the slate breakdowns coming out this weekend on Fantasy Labs and the Action Network pod on Friday and Sunday and Monday.
There we go. You can follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Raybon. You can follow me at ThePME, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Again, sorry about the voice. It's slowly coming back. I can't hit those peaks. So maybe I'm not waking your kids up while you're trying to listen anymore, and maybe that's a good thing. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. Smash that like button and enter the draw, of course. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!